Welcome back to the podcast. Today, we're diving into a topic that often sparks a lot of conversation, and sometimes a fair bit of skepticism: the historical evidence for Christianity. You know, a lot of people just assume faith is, well, purely faith. But what if we looked at what the evidence actually shows?
Okay, Peter, you've got my attention. When you say evidence, my immediate thought goes to, ancient manuscripts and dusty old stones. And honestly, for a lot of us, it just sounds like a way to rationalize something that's already believed. How do we really know it's not just a collection of myths that got written down?
That's a very fair point, Thomas, and it's a question many people have. It's crucial to distinguish between blind faith and an informed faith that engages with historical realities. My goal, and I think yours too, is to be intellectually honest. So, let's consider the New Testament not just as a theological document, but as a collection of historical records.
Right, historical records, but written by people who clearly had an agenda, right? I mean, who writes a biography of someone they don't believe in? And how do we know these records haven't been altered or embellished over centuries? That's a huge hurdle for me. It's like a game of telephone across millennia.
Excellent question, Thomas, and it brings us right to the heart of textual criticism and historical reliability. When we examine ancient documents, we look at several criteria: the number of copies, the time gap between the original writing and the earliest copies, and the internal and external consistency of the text. For the New Testament, the numbers are truly astonishing compared to other ancient literature.
Astonishing how? Are we talking a dozen more copies than, say, Homer? Because astonishing feels a bit like marketing speak to me.
No, not a dozen, Thomas. We have over 5,800 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. And when you include other ancient versions like the Latin Vulgate, that number climbs to over 20,000. Now compare that to a classic like Caesar's Gallic Wars, for which we have maybe 10 good manuscripts, with the earliest one dating about 1,000 years after Caesar wrote it. For the New Testament, some fragments like P52 date to within decades of the original writings.
Okay, wow, that's actually a lot more than I thought. Decades? Like within a lifetime. That's definitely compelling on the telephone game front, but are they all identical? I imagine if you have that many copies, there have to be discrepancies, right? Little changes here and there that snowball into big theological shifts.
You're absolutely right, there are textual variations, but this is actually a sign of healthy textual transmission, not corruption. Think about it. If all 20,000 copies were absolutely identical, that would suggest a coordinated effort to clean up the text, which would be highly suspicious. The vast majority of these variations are minor. Things like spelling differences, word order, or a missing article. Less than 1% of the variations affect the meaning in any significant way, and none impact core Christian doctrines.
That's a perspective I hadn't considered. So, the sheer volume and the minor variations actually strengthen the case for authenticity, rather than weakening it. I guess that makes sense. It's like having 1,000 witnesses to an event. They'll all remember slightly different details, but the core event remains consistent.
Precisely. And not only do we have the manuscript evidence, but we also have corroborating archaeological findings. The historical record indicates a surprising level of detail and accuracy in the New Testament that archaeology continues to affirm. For instance, critics used to doubt the existence of Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor mentioned in the Gospels.
Yeah, I've heard that one. Is he real or just a character to move the plot along?
Exactly. But in 1961, archaeologists discovered the Pilate stone in Caesarea Maritima, a dedication stone with Pilate's name and title on it. It's an undeniable, physical piece of evidence confirming his governorship. It's not just a biblical reference. He was a real historical figure.
Okay, that's pretty wild. A literal stone with his name on it. That's harder to argue with than a story. Anything else like that?
Oh, absolutely. Think about Caiaphas, the Jewish high priest who presided over Jesus' trial. For a long time, he was just a name in the Gospels and Josephus. Then, in 1990, an ossuary, a bone box, was discovered in Jerusalem, clearly inscribed with the name Joseph, son of Caiaphas. It was a high-status burial, consistent with what we know of the high priestly family. This is the very individual involved in those pivotal events.
So, you're saying the major players in the biblical narrative are being confirmed by archaeological finds. That's surprisingly specific. I always figured archaeological finds were more about confirming general periods or cities, not specific people.
That's the beauty of it. And it extends to places too. Cities like Capernaum, Bethsaida, and Chorazin, which Jesus frequently visited and taught in, have all been extensively excavated. Their existence and their general characteristics, as described in the New Testament, are consistent with what archaeologists have found. It paints a very real, tangible picture.
This is all fascinating, but I'm still having trouble with, well, the supernatural stuff. I mean, okay, Pilate existed, Caiaphas existed. The towns were real. But that doesn't necessarily mean miracles happened or that Jesus rose from the dead. That feels like a leap.
And that's where we move beyond just general corroboration into the specific claims of the New Testament. The historical reliability of the framework, the people, and the places provides a strong foundation. If the authors are consistently accurate on verifiable details, it lends credibility to their overall testimony, even concerning things we can't directly excavate or prove with a stone.
I guess. But people lie, right? Or they get things wrong, especially when it comes to things they believe really strongly. A lot of cultures have stories of gods coming back from the dead. What makes Jesus' story different from, say, Osiris or Dionysus?
Another excellent and common objection, Thomas. The dying and rising God myth argument has been thoroughly debunked by scholars across the board, even non-Christian ones. There are superficial similarities, but the key differences are profound. For instance, these pagan myths don't claim to be historical events, they don't involve a real historical figure like Jesus, and they lack the kind of eyewitness testimony and subsequent historical impact that Christianity does. Josh McDowell, in his work Evidence That Demands a Verdict, dedicates extensive chapters to these comparisons, demonstrating how dissimilar they truly are.
Okay, so less copycat and more superficial coincidence, got it. But still, the eyewitnesses. How reliable are they, really? If I saw something extraordinary, I might convince myself it was even more extraordinary, you know? Humans are prone to wishful thinking.
Absolutely. But let's look at the nature of the eyewitness accounts in the New Testament. They're often raw, unpolished, and even include embarrassing details about the disciples, things authors trying to fabricate a story typically avoid. For example, Peter denying Jesus 3 times, or the disciples constantly misunderstanding Jesus' teachings. This lends an air of authenticity. Furthermore, these weren't just a few people. Paul speaks of over 500 witnesses seeing the resurrected Christ at one time, many of whom were still alive when he wrote his letters and could be questioned.
500 people. That's a lot of people to be in on a conspiracy, especially if they're all willing to, die for it. Which, I guess a lot of them did, right? That always struck me as odd. You don't die for a lie unless you're truly delusional or convinced.
That's exactly it. The historical record indicates the apostles and many early Christians faced immense persecution and death rather than recant their belief in the resurrection. People will die for what they believe to be true, but they generally won't die for what they know to be a lie. That's a crucial distinction. The dramatic transformation of these fearful disciples into bold evangelists suggests something profoundly impactful happened.
So, we have the manuscript evidence suggesting high textual integrity, archaeological finds confirming historical figures and locations, and the transformed lives and martyrdoms of eyewitnesses as a form of social proof. It's a lot to process. I mean, it's not what I expected coming into this.
And we haven't even touched on external secular sources yet. Writers like Tacitus, Pliny the Younger, and Josephus, non-Christian historians, all mention Jesus and early Christians. Tacitus, a Roman historian, writes about Christ's execution under Pontius Pilate and the existence of Christians in Rome in the mid-1st century. Pliny the Younger, a Roman governor, writes to Emperor Trajan about how to deal with Christians, describing their practices and their refusal to recant. These aren't Christian apologists. They're hostile or neutral observers confirming key aspects of the early Christian narrative.
Hold on. Roman historians wrote about Jesus? I always thought that was a major missing piece, that there wasn't any mention of him outside of the Bible. You're telling me that's not true? My whole understanding of this might be off.
That's a very common misconception, Thomas. It's often propagated that there's no evidence for Jesus outside the Bible. But when we look at the historical record, it clearly indicates otherwise. These Roman writers, writing relatively soon after the events, corroborate the existence of Jesus, his execution under Pilate, and the rapid spread of his followers. They confirm the facts even if they didn't believe in the claims.
Okay, that's significant. Like genuinely significant. I always assumed that if there were these external sources, they'd be shouted from the rooftops by Christians, but I've just never encountered them in my sporadic church background or online. It makes me wonder what other information I've been missing.
It's exactly why I love these discussions, Thomas. There's a wealth of scholarship out there that addresses these very questions. What often happens is that popular culture or quick sound bites on social media tend to simplify or even misrepresent the historical data. The academic consensus among most historians, even secular ones, is that Jesus was a real historical figure. The debate isn't whether he existed, but rather what his true nature and identity were.
So, the Jesus never existed argument is mostly a fringe thing, not mainstream historical thought. That's good to know. I guess I've been buying into some of the social media hype without doing my own homework.
Precisely. And that's okay, many people do. But let's look at what the evidence actually shows, and it points to a very real, very impactful historical person. So when you put all these pieces together, the robust manuscript tradition, the archaeological confirmations, the external secular testimonies, and the radical transformation of the early disciples, it builds a cumulative case for the historical reliability of the New Testament that is, quite frankly, unmatched by almost any other ancient historical document.
I'm not gonna lie, Peter. This is a lot to chew on. You've given me a completely different lens to look through. I came in here thinking it was going to be a faith versus reason battle, but you're actually showing me how much reason and historical inquiry can be applied to these claims.
That's the point, Thomas. Faith isn't meant to be a leap in the dark, but often a step into the light, illuminated by evidence. It's about being honest with the historical data, wherever it leads. And if it leads to a historically plausible account of a man who claimed to be God and rose from the dead, then that's a truth worth considering.
It definitely gives me a lot to think about. I'm still skeptical, of course, that's just my nature. But my skepticism feels a little more informed now. Instead of just dismissing everything outright, I'm finding myself wanting to dig into some of these sources you've mentioned, like that Josh McDowell book.
That's fantastic to hear, Thomas. That's all anyone can ask for, an open mind and a willingness to investigate. And honestly, delving into these details is where the real satisfaction lies, for me at least. It's not about winning an argument, but about discovering truth.
Well, you've certainly piqued my curiosity. I guess I've got some reading to do. Thanks, Peter, for actually taking my doubts seriously, and not just telling me to have faith. That makes a huge difference.
My pleasure, Thomas. That's what this is all about. For our listeners, if you're like Thomas and have questions, don't shy away from the evidence. Take the time to investigate and see where the historical record leads you. You might be surprised by what you find. Join us next time for more explorations into faith and history.